Thanks for joining us here on This Week in Agribusiness. Max, one of the great things about getting to be on the road a lot, talking to farmers, is you get to see neat stuff along the roadside. I understand you found a pretty interesting museum here this past week.
Oh, man, we sure did. You know, you probably have the same problem I do sometimes. We need more time to stop and see things along the way. That isn't always possible. But the museum we saw at a radio station in Kentucky is one you need to know about. We'll share that in just a moment. We found it by visiting with our farm broadcaster friend Alan Watts, who's on the radio WKDZ, WHBO at Cadiz, Kentucky. I asked him about how crops were, what the season was like there for farmers.
Spring was really wet. We had a lot of water, a lot of rain, so farmers really planted their corn crops in two stages. They had one stage planted early in the season, early in the April time frame, and then it rained probably 3 to 4 weeks, just almost constant rain, and so it delayed a lot of the planting of corn. So you had the second corn crop planted later on, and as you can expect in a year like that, it's not going to happen. Every farmers at the time said, just hope it doesn't quit. Well, July time frame it quit. The wheat crop was probably an average crop for the wheat farmers here, which was a good thing. And then you get around June, July time frame, the rain quit. No rain when corn tassels out. That's really when you need the rain, when it's pollinating. No rain there, but and then we probably haven't really actually had almost a drought here in the fall too. We had some rain back in the September time frame and got some needed rain there, but then it's been dry again. So farmers who are sowing forage for the fall really needed some rain up until about a week ago or so. And in fact, some parts of far west Kentucky are in the D3, D4 drought on the drought monitor, which could trigger some federal assistance there. So it's been an interesting year. Corn yields, wheat yields were decent. Average wheat yields were decent where they normally are. Corn yields probably, they ran anywhere from 120 bushels to an acre, 160 bushels to an acre. You had irrigation, you may have gotten a couple hundred bushels an acre, a little bit more, unless you got lucky enough to have a river bottom. Then you may be up around the 250 range, but it just depending on where you were. Soybean yields have been decent. They haven't been the greatest in the world, but they've been decent this fall because soybeans, somehow or another, the soybeans and the technology in these beans, and the corn too for that matter, Max, you know, the corn, they've done so much work in research and the technology with the corn. Somehow or another, they were able to make a decent crop out of a year that some 25 years ago would have been a 20 or 30 bushel to the acre crop. And this year it actually come out decent. And the soybeans the same way. Soybeans somehow or another have done well and actually turned out to be a decent crop. Tobacco, on the other hand, loves dry weather. So a good year for tobacco is not necessarily a good year for corn, but the tobacco's really done well. Probably one of our better crops of tobacco here this year, dark fire tobacco in this area, just because of the dry weather. So it just depending on what works, you know.
There's a museum here at the studios in Cadiz, Kentucky, Radio Museum, which obviously interests somebody like myself, long in the business. I can see microphones I've used in the past there. What's the story behind it?
Story behind it, our previous owner, DJ Everett, who passed away a few years ago, he was a huge collector of radios. And so when he passed away, Beth and here at the station, Beth Mann, now our president, general manager, so Beth wanted to do something special to remember DJ Willie Wilson, who was our founder of WKDZ in particular, and DJ was a longtime newsman in the news business, very instrumental in West Kentucky here. So Beth put together two different parts of it, a Legends Room, which is really dedicated to Willie Wilson and DJ Everett. DJ, we have the old RCA microphone, some of the original control boards we had at WKDZ for many years. The RCA microphone was used by a gentleman in Hopkinsville who did the old sunflower commercials. Sunflower was a big flour milling operation here locally, and they are well known across this region of the country. And he did mighty fine bacon every time on that same microphone that we have displayed, reel to reel.
Mighty fine bacon every time.
Mighty fine bacon every time, and that's the way they used to come on the news, brought to you by Sunflower every morning. And so it was kind of an iconic way to do that. So Beth collected that microphone. We got that from his son when he passed away, and she really lays out the history of those two gentlemen in the small room. And then you go to the big room. It is really a collection. Beth has put together a wonderful collection of radios from the beginning of radio, 1919. Has a history of radio in Kentucky, and we go from 1919 all the way up until present radio, and present radio stops with a look inside the studio of WKDC right now, and see what radio is today. But it's anything from the war years in the 1940s to 1919 when they had crystal sets and some history in there as well among folks of DAR chapters, and we have radios we've collected and uniforms from the World War II era, and there weren't many radios. Actually, I'm sure you know that not many radios made during World War II because of everything that was going on, but we actually have a couple of radios made during that time, and Beth has been a great collector of those and looked all over far and wide, and we've had people say, hey, heard about this radio museum, I got something I want to loan you for it, and we have a lot of loan pieces in there too that just are iconic for radio, and really traces how radio began and the way radio changed over the years from where it was just a little electronic set to something that was actually pretty for the housewife, because when mom gets involved in it, then she doesn't want this ugly piece of wires and tubes sitting on the counter, wants something to look pretty there. So it kind of traces the evolution of radio all the way up to what it is today. So it's pretty neat to go in there sometimes and just reflect on radio and where we've come and where we are today.
Oh my, a lot of history in that room, and we're so appreciative to Alan Watts for sharing it with us. Beth Mann, who owns the radio station there, great staff, wonderful people. We had just a tremendous visit. Dined out at the Horseshoe in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Don't you love those local places?
Yes, I certainly do, Max.
I'm sure you find your share along the way.
I do. I'm no stranger to a greasy spoon.
That's right. Radio, you think about what it was like in the early days, and you really get a feel for it in that museum. There's more coming up here. Stay with us.